And now, please welcome the co-host and producer of the online news show, The Young Turks, Ana Kasparian.
Hi, everyone. What's up? I'm here with my power bun, and I'm about to have a power panel of incredible women, and we're going to discuss politics. Who's excited to discuss politics with me? Yes. Yes. Well, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. We have comedian, actress, and author Chelsea Handler. Please give her a round of applause. Also joining us is Senator Kirsten Gillibrand from New York. Thank you for joining us today, ladies. And I'm really looking forward to this discussion because now more than ever, I see a lot of people involved in political discussions, especially young people. I look at this audience and I see so many young people who are fired up and they want to make a change in the country. And so do you. So let me start off by kind of getting your thoughts on the current political climate. I'll start with you, Chelsea.
Well, it's a shit show, and I mean, it's embarrassing. You know, it's embarrassing that we elected a man like this. It's embarrassing that the Republican Party continues to look the other way every time he causes more damage, whether it's international or it's on a domestic stage. I mean, just his policies alone are so unfathomable and so inhumane, the way he conducts himself. So it's not all about, I mean, I know there's a lot of talk about impeachment, and I'm galvanized to get people out to the polls. I want everyone to vote. I want everyone's vote to count. And we just have to stand up and make a change in 2018. And we have done that over the course of these past special elections, over the course of the last year and a half. We have shown that, first time we are electing more women, we are electing more people of color, more gay, lesbian, LGBT community, we've had our first trans woman elected. I mean, we are making so much progress in the span of, a year and a half. This is so hopeful, and it is such an exciting time to be a woman and to be a participant. So there is a silver lining, and we can fight this. And if everybody gets out and votes, we are stronger than Russia.
Senator Gillibrand, Trump ran a campaign that was incredibly divisive, and he didn't really hide who he was, with the exception of running on a populist platform. And what I mean by that is he claimed that he was going to drain the swamp. He claimed that he had no interest in the corporate corruption that he himself actually exploited for his own personal benefit. What do you think it was that led to someone like Trump getting elected? Was there something that Democrats missed, and what have Democrats learned from that election?
I think he did steal some of the Democrats' best messages. He didn't mean it when he said it, but he started with the system's rigged. That's Liz Warren's message, and it is rigged. And so for a lot of voters around the country, they thought, well, maybe this person as an outsider will blow up the system. Maybe he's the one who will help, get me a better job, and so I can earn my way into the middle class and live the American dream. He also ran on no bad trade deals, which was Bernie Sanders' message. And that to a lot of voters might have meant, I want to see Made in America. I want to see Made in America right here in upstate New York. Maybe I want to see Made in America on Long Island. So for a lot of people in my state who I've talked to since the election, there were a lot of messages that were populist, more democratic messages that they thought was right. And then his third message was his own racist message. That was build a wall. And he intended that as a dog whistle to create division, hate, and chaos in society, which he's continued to push since becoming president, with his Muslim ban, with his attack on DACA kids, with separating mothers and children at the border. He's continued to divide and sow hate. But I think for me personally, I think what voters are looking for are people who will fight for them. And I think the Democrats have always been for really core values like healthcare is a right, not a privilege. The fact that I will fight for your child as much as I will fight for my own, that every child in America has the opportunity, should have the opportunity to live and reach their God-given potential, and that you do that with education, with healthcare, with clean air, clean water. It shouldn't matter what block you grow up on as to whether you will succeed in life. And so that is what we're for, and that is what we're going to fight for. And I just want to compliment what Chelsea said, because she's quite right. The silver lining is the grassroots. The fact that people have risen to the occasion, are fighting back, speaking out in all ways, whether they're showing up to events like this, showing up to town halls, writing to their congressmen and senators, protesting outside their offices, marching. I mean, I don't know how many people here marched for the Women's March, either one of them. But it was an amazing moment, because it was an intersectional moment. It was when everyone came together to voice what they were concerned about. So it didn't matter if it was Black Lives Matter or women's reproductive freedom or clean air, clean water or pro-immigration stances. It just mattered that you made your sign, that you marched, that you were heard, and that is where the power is. The power is with the people.
I love that there has been this reemergence of political activism, especially among young people. And I think part of that was motivated because so many young people felt disillusioned by the 2016 election. And a lot of young people decided to stay home or vote for a third-party candidate. And it was because of this rebellion against Democrats. And I do really want to ask you about that, because hopefully there were some lessons learned by Democrats from the past election, and I wanted to get your thoughts on that.
I think what voters are looking for are people who speak from the heart with a great deal of passion and drive about what they care about, why they're fighting, why they care. And to the extent Democrats weren't doing enough of that, weren't listening enough, listening hard enough to their constituents about why their lives were so challenged, that's why you lose an election, because you're not listening to the people you represent. You're not listening to the grassroots. So I think it was a wake-up call for all of us to just remember who we are, who we're fighting for, and why we're here. And when people do that, they will win. And I think it's just important for us, and as grassroots activists, to use this moment to be heard, to make sure our voices are being heard, our goals are being focused on, and not give a pass to any politician. And the group that's doing it the best are the young people with the anti-gun movement. The fact that you have young women like Emma Gonzalez speaking up and calling BS on every lie every politician's ever told her, and young men standing up to Marco Rubio and saying, I dare you to not take NRA money, and he not having the courage to do it. So I think the grassroots is rising, and that is a lesson for all political leaders.
Chelsea, what do you think would be the best strategy for Democratic lawmakers moving forward? Is there a message that they can all unite on other than we hate Trump, please vote for us because we oppose him?
Well, no, I'm not a strategist, so I won't dip my toes into what the Democrats can do better. I think the thing is, and this is what I tell people, I've gone around the country trying to galvanize young people to get involved and stay involved. I mean, this is an emergency in my opinion, and I've taken this year to really focus on actually having some impact and actually putting my money where my mouth is and showing up in places that I wouldn't normally spend time in to talk to people and gain a better understanding of why it is that I was so out of the loop and didn't think like something like this was possible. You know, I was misinformed, and I want to be better informed. And what I say to everyone, and I believe this to be true, is politics doesn't have to be the North Wall, on the Game of Thrones, and it's so scary and you don't understand it. Yes, it's very complex, but you just have to find one issue that means something to you, and you find candidates that are aligned with that issue, whether it's gun reform, whether it's the woman for, the right to choose for a woman's body, which was decided almost 60 years ago, which we have to relitigate every generation. Whatever issue, if it's legalizing marijuana, find the candidate that you care about and that aligns with those issues, and then that's how you start getting involved. And then you find out what issues also matter to you. But it is important for everybody to activate and stay activated. And I think this last election taught us that a lot of people thought they could just stay home and other people would take care of it. And that's not what happened.
So you had this special on Netflix before the election even took place. It was, I believe, a 4-episode special where you wanted to do a deep dive on topics that you were curious about. One of the topics that I thought was fascinating was racism. You went to some southern states and you actually spoke to people living in rural areas. And so you had this political awakening even before Trump was a thing, right? So what was the turning point for you? When did you decide you wanted to become politically aware and politically active?
I think for me, when everyone was saying elitist after the election, I was like, I'm not an elitist. I'm from New Jersey. My dad was a used car dealer. Like, yeah, I'm an elitist. I tried very hard to become one, and I didn't realize that's exactly what I had become. I worked very hard to get away from my family, have a life of my own, have a big house in LA. Yes, I turned into an elitist, and that means being ill-informed about the rest of the country and people's experiences that are unlike my own. So my goal in this year, I'm doing another documentary on that very topic, white privilege, for Netflix, that I start shooting next month. But on that issue alone, we're all wrapped up in our own lives. We're all consumed with our day-to-days. If you have children, if you're working more than one job, you don't have time to think about what it's like for somebody who has lesser opportunities than you do, or fewer opportunities than you do. You don't have time to look outside your lane. And for me, it is mandatory, since I have the luxury to be able to do something like that, to make it count, to not sit back and bitch and moan and not do something about it.
Senator Gillibrand, so I do want to pass that question on to you, the question about strategy, since that is something that you need to think about as a senator. You yourself have made some pretty big, bold decisions following the 2016 election. For instance, you have made a pledge to no longer accept corporate PAC money. And we at the Young Turks feel passionately about that. We have our own political action committee to get money out of politics through a constitutional amendment. So yes, Wolfpack, check it out if you're interested. So I wanted to ask you what motivated you to do that, because you did move further to the left following the election, and I want you to have an opportunity to respond to those who are skeptical, who are curious whether or not you even mean what you're doing, if it's just a political ploy or if this is something that you genuinely feel passionately about.
So I think getting money out of politics is the most important thing any candidate in America can be for. And I'll tell you why. Because money in politics has either a directly corrupting effect or at least has a soft corruption effect. Meaning that if you are only spending time with people who are giving you money, then as Chelsea said, you aren't hearing 99.9% of the rest of the country. You're not hearing what their priorities are, what they care about. And if you're only spending your time with the elite, political or financial elite, you will never be a good public servant. You will never be able to really hear what your constituents need and what they want. And I have always cared about transparency and accountability. When I was a House member, I was the first member of Congress to post my schedule, to post my earmark requests, and to post my financial disclosure online so my constituents could know what I was doing, who I was meeting with, and who had my ear. And when I did make an earmark request for, let's say, the local senior center to rebuild a new facility, I would make sure if anyone from that organization had given me a donation, I returned that donation. Because I want to take money out of politics, and I want to end the perception that money decides what your positions are. So this has been a much longer journey than that. I also believe that to be a good member of Congress, you really do have to listen to your grassroots. And back to the point you said, what do Democrats need to learn? Which is why I was for Medicare for All when I was a House member in a 2-to-1 Republican district. Because the reason I was for Medicare for All was because when you listen to people you represent, they still couldn't afford health care. And health care wasn't a right. It really was a privilege. And so you needed to figure out, how can I get at least one not-for-profit public option available? And so what I proposed 12 years ago was we should be for Medicare for All. Let anybody buy in at a rate they can afford, so they have at least one piece of competition from the not-for-profit sector. Because the insurance industry shouldn't really be involved in health care, because they have to guarantee their corporate profits, they have to guarantee their shareholder value, they have to pay that CEO millions of dollars. And if you had the not-for-profit option, single payer, Medicare for All, Medicaid for All, any of those could work, because you're taking out that fat profit margin. But I think, so I think getting money out of politics is the solution, and it's one of the problems I think generally with what's wrong with Washington. I think it's fundamentally broken because the people with the most money, industries with a lot of money, hire a lot of lobbyists. People with a lot of money have a lot of access. Is there a reason why Congress has never taken on the drug companies? Yes, there is. And the reason is they dump a ton of money into politics. Is there a reason why people won't stand up to the NRA? Yes, there is, because they are entirely funded by the gun manufacturers who want to sell assault rifles to teenagers from Walmart. So the truth is that you have to, if you're going to do anything to really meet the needs of your constituents, and this is something I've always believed in, you literally have to get the money out of politics, and you have to be able to listen to your constituents more, to give them the time and the ear that they deserve so that actually our government can be controlled by the people, not the wealthy and the powerful.
I just want to piggyback on that for a second, because I've spoken with her about this very issue before, and it is something we can overturn Citizens United. People are like, well, that's not even possible. It is a possibility. Anything's Donald Trump is the president. Anything is possible. So it is a possibility, and there isn't a person in this room, I'm guessing, that would vote for continuing to have being allowed super PACs to give money for private individuals to give money. We don't want to give money to politicians. I don't want to have to give money every election cycle to the person I want to win. I want them actually not spending their weekends fundraising and coming home every weekend and raising money. I want them working and serving their constituents. So it is a very real, plausible thing that can happen, and it should be introduced into the conversation as a reality.
So one of the trends that I'm seeing and loving is, even though, you know, we haven't seen official changes in money in politics, whether it's through the Supreme Court or through a constitutional amendment, people are getting involved in politics and they're pressuring politicians to refuse corporate PAC money. And we're seeing completely new politicians, new candidates emerging with that as their, the center of their platform. Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez is an example. So I do want to talk about what that stunning upset in your state represented, because there are some mixed responses coming from some Democratic lawmakers, and I wanted to know what you think about it, Senator Gillibrand. Do you believe that that election represents a significant change in the party, or do you think it's just indicative of that particular district?
I don't think it's a change in the party. I think she ran an inspiring campaign, and she ran on issues that she cared really deeply about. She ran on Medicare for All, which we talked about, and is the answer, is the solution. She ran on getting money out of politics. She ran on abolish ICE to change what's happening at the border. So she really ran from her heart about issues that she cared deeply about. And that is the key to a good public servant, and is the key to a democracy that represents you and not the moneyed interests. So I think she just did a good job, and I think people are going to be excited for her to come to Washington and shake things up.
All right. So, Chelsea, I wanted to ask you a little bit about the political issues that speak to you. What are the political issues that you're the most concerned about and want to, draw the most attention to?
Any marginalized community, I think, we have to stick up and fight. People in positions who have platforms have to stick up and fight for any marginalized community, whether it's LGBTQ community, whether it's the Mexican community, whether it's the African American community. They need our voices loudly. We have to sing with them, and the more we sing together, the more we become a chorus, and then it becomes unacceptable for us to allow that to happen to other people, to marginalized groups. I mean, this administration is making a mockery out of the very thing we've fought so hard and for so long to get away from. We have a very deeply disturbing history in this country of racism, and what's happening now and what's been happening, and fortunately for us, we have more proof and people can see it every day, so it's undeniable, is that these people need us to stand by them and stand up for them. Women's rights is obviously a huge, very personal issue for me because I am one, but I think we all have to stick our necks out for people that experiences, again, are unlike our own. You can't just fight for the group that you're in.
This is a question for both of you because it's an issue that keeps coming up. It's a question that keeps coming up for me as someone who works in the media. It seems as though Donald Trump is immune to any consequences for any scandal that he's part of. So right now, there are two major issues that the news keeps talking about. Of course, his joint press conference with Vladimir Putin, where he essentially puts down our own intelligence organizations and says that he believes someone who historically has been our adversary. And then there's also the issue of paying off porn stars and strippers that he had affairs with right before the election. Why is it that in the past, politicians would have their careers completely destroyed by even taking part in one of those scandals, and Trump, for some reason, is untouchable? His base stands by his side no matter what. What is your take on that?
I blame the Kardashians. I blame them for everything. I just think it's a degradation. I'd like to believe that this is the death cough of racism in America. I'm probably wrong, but this just seems like we're really, really clawing at something that is old and antiquated. And I hope that our society does a little bit better, that we get a little bit more educated and we get a little smarter and we get a little bit more compassionate.
And it's not over. It's not over till it's over. I really believe that this next election is our opportunity to be heard, to say it is not okay what President Trump has done in terms of degrading minorities, in terms of racist statements, in terms of anti-Muslim sentiment, in terms of literally every hate-filled statement and sentence he's uttered. And I do believe this is a moment for true accountability and transparency in government. And I think if the grassroots works as hard as they've been working in all these special elections, I mean, we won that Alabama Senate seat because black women turned out overwhelmingly and made sure that a credibly accused pedophile was not a U.S. senator. The same thing happened with the special election in Pennsylvania and around the country in local elections. We really have turned out different people who are voting. Women are voting in record numbers. Young people are voting in record numbers. And different people, young people and women, are running for Congress and other offices. Higher Heights, who helps African-American women run for Congress, double the number of people than ever before. Emily's List, who funds women candidates pro-choice, they'd normally be working with about 1,000 candidates. They're working with 37,000 candidates right now. So I think things are changing, and despite how uncomfortable we feel that there's been no real accountability over President Trump yet, I believe the American people will get to the bottom of all the allegations with regard to Russia, all the allegations with regard to collusion, with regard to obstruction of justice, and with regard to self-lining of pockets, the emoluments clause. I think we will get to the bottom of all those issues. But in the meantime, it's really about owning this democracy and doing the hard work it takes to elect candidates in all 50 states, in all congressional districts, and in local elections that share our values. And I think if we fight hard, we make our phone calls, we knock on doors, we do all the work it takes, we will prevail. And just to close that loop, if we do flip the House, which I think we will, and we do flip the Senate, we can block the worst things President Trump's trying to do. We can block legislatively what he's trying to do in the House, and in the Senate, we can block the next Supreme Court justice.
So I have a follow-up question for you on that, but before I give you that question, Chelsea, I just got a message from my mom. She wants me to tell you that she's a huge fan of yours. So there you go, Mom.
Where did you get that? On your iPhone?
Yeah, on my watch. Yeah, I'm like,
I only have a Fitbit. My mom's not texting me. Tell her I say hello. Thank you.
Yes, yes. So, Senator Gillibrand, I love that you mentioned the importance of not just the presidential election, but also the midterm elections, which historically have very low turnout. So, yes, please go vote. Make sure you know what's going on a local level. It is incredibly important. But I want to go back in time a little bit and discuss this magic era of Democrats having complete control. And what I mean by that is we had Barack Obama as the new president of the United States, and Democrats also had control of the House and the Senate. But there were a lot of concessions to, Republican lawmakers at that time. When in reality, there really didn't need to be concessions. I mean, Republicans are much less willing to work with Democrats. They don't reach across the aisle. And, you know, the nomination of Merrick Garland as a Supreme Court justice is an example of that. What happened in that case was just such an injustice and so infuriating. So what happened during Obama's first term, and how can we ensure that Democrats get things done if they have that level of power in the future?
So when we flip the House and flip the Senate, I think the first thing we should do is deal with the children who are being separated from their families at the border. We should, I think we should get rid of ICE. We should separate out the two missions and do the anti-terrorism mission, the national security mission, and then on the other side, make sure you're doing looking at immigration as a humanitarian issue. These are civil issues. These are families. Look at it as the economic engine that it is, that immigration is our strength. It is our diversity is what makes this country and our economy so strong. So re-looking at that issue. I think we should pass the gun reform issues within the first month, all of them. Universal background checks, anti-trafficking, making sure people can't buy bump stocks, large magazine clips, all that work. I would do all that. I would just focus on the things that the American people are so angry about and really passionate about. And one of our challenges, as you said, when we had the time with healthcare, I don't know why we didn't start with Medicare for All. It was such a mistake to build Obamacare on a very moderate, very almost conservative model of placing it on top of the for-profit insurance industry. I just think that was a mistake. The intention was good. The intention was to bring Republicans on board, to make this a bipartisan bill. But when they all voted against it and wouldn't support the bill, you should have gone back to the right answer, which would have been Medicare for All. So I think the lesson of that is be what you're for, really try to mobilize the American people to support what you're for, and try to do some of that stuff in the first year, like getting money out of politics, focusing on simple solutions like postal banking, which I can explain if you want, or focus on any of the economic things that would make people's lives better, like giving them the job training they need to get the jobs, to make sure that anybody who wants to be working full-time can be working full-time. Like, that's where the solutions lie, and we need to do that stuff, because that's what the American people are so angry about. It's what they're fighting about. It's what they're protesting about. So listening to the people we represent.
I love that. And I just want to give you credit for admitting, you know, past mistakes of Democratic lawmakers, because I think that that is a bold thing to do, and it's something that we don't see from a lot of lawmakers. You know, backstage, we talked about other political issues, and you told me something that I was really impressed by. You said, I made a mistake, and I didn't know enough, and I should have done more. So I kind of want to talk a little bit about that, if you're okay with it. Back in 2006, you joined the Blue Dog Democrats, who are notoriously either centrist or conservative Democrats. And at that time, there was, you know, this fiscal component of that, and then there was also the immigration component of that. They were against amnesty for immigrants. And, you know, tell me why you decided to join the Blue Dog Democrats and how you've changed since then.
So I represented upstate New York, and I wanted to really show that I was prudent on financial issues. And I've continued to show that as a member of Congress. I voted against the bank bailout twice. I thought giving, and the way that bill was written was giving literally all the bad debt in the hands of the taxpayer, and having to pay $1 on the dollar wasn't fair for the taxpayers. And I thought that that is not how we're going to get out of this fiscal crisis. And so I wanted to be able to have an independent view on financial issues, and that was an example of what I did. But on immigration, I did not have enough understanding of the issues that affect families from all across this country, particularly all across New York, and I was wrong. And so when I had the responsibility to represent the whole state, I spent a lot more time with families that were in crisis because of very radical immigration policies that were separating families, denying families' ability to be together. And the more I see what's happening at the border, it destroys my soul. It is so inhumane. I just know I'm on the right side now.
So, touching a little bit on the economic issues in the country, Chelsea, I'm curious what you personally learned by talking to people who would accuse you of being an elitist. And by the way, I just want to mention one thing, since we are talking about elitists. Trump himself just recently said, I'm an elitist. You know, like, you know, his whole campaign was, we're anti-elitist, and then bragged about being an elitist. So he can basically play both sides, and it's okay for him to do it. But, you know, I like the fact that you realized, hey, you know what, there's a disconnect between what I'm experiencing in America and what the vast majority of people are experiencing. So I'm curious, what did you learn? What did you notice by talking to people throughout the country?
Well, I've talked to a lot of people in, like, you know, very small rural towns, a lot of white men who align themselves with Trump, who believe that Trump is more like them than an African American who's experiencing the same socioeconomic frustration. They have more in common with black, you know, brothers and sisters than they do with somebody like Donald Trump. The idea that he is peddling is just to always keep somebody underneath you. You know, we always have to be divisive because we want somebody to be doing, you know, not as well as we're doing. And if we're doing badly, then we need somebody underneath us. I mean, it's the age-old story in the entire world. You know, we did it to the Irish, we did it to Native American Indians, we did it to Italians, and then we did it to black people. So that's what this is all about, is having an upper hand on something. You know, it's not a zero-sum game. You know, as a woman, which is technically a minority in this country and in my business, people always, you know, talked about what a disadvantage it was, you know, to have competition, or you're kind of geared and trained to compete against people who are, you know, in your field or in your business. There's only room for one of us or two of us or three of us, definitely not four. The idea is if someone like us is successful, that's a huge bonus for all of us. We want other people to succeed. So that mentality is very backwards. It isn't a zero-sum game. You know, when one woman does well, other women do well, and that's proven. And I would apply that to every marginalized group, and that's why it's so important to let people be more aware of why they want to be so disruptive, so divisive, and non-inclusive. Inclusivity is where it's at. You know, the world's getting browner and gayer, so hop on board.
Since you mentioned women in the workplace, I'm curious what your thoughts are regarding Ivanka Trump and her activism in getting women more rights in the workplace.
Did that happen, though? What did she do?
Right, exactly. So
listen, I have a father who's a shyster, okay? He was a used car dealer. He is the definition of a shyster. He's not Donald Trump. Luckily, he was never that successful. But never once in my life did I sit there and sit down when my dad did something terrible or what I thought was inappropriate to another person who was weaker. I never, ever kept my mouth shut. So it is unfathomable to me how a woman who has a family can sit back and remain silent while there are children being put in cages at our border. It's unfathomable. So she deserves everything she gets.
I love that. Well, ironically enough, I mean, she can comfortably sit back and do nothing because she's part of the elite. I mean, she's untouched by what many Americans are going through today, either at the workplace or what families are going through at the border as they seek amnesty. You know, it's hilarious that she was supposed to be a mitigating factor in Trump's administration, and she has been complicit in a lot of what's been going on. So let's be absolutely clear about that. So let's also talk a little bit about the Me2 movement, because I think the Me2 movement empowered women on a lot of issues, you know, aside from sexual harassment, sexual assault, which of course was important to touch on. But all of a sudden you see women becoming active in other ways as well, feeling emboldened and empowered. And so what can we do to continue that momentum? Because, you know, I do get concerned that sometimes things will fizzle out, right? So what can we do to help support that movement and get more women to get involved in politics?
So I think the Me Too movement is a very powerful movement because it created a space for women and men to talk about some of the worst thing that's ever happened to them and to get some measure of accountability. But it's not finished until every woman or man who's been sexually assaulted or sexually harassed in the workplace can get justice. And there's so many women, whether you're a low-wage worker who can't possibly get fired if she calls out her boss because she needs to pay her bills and feed her children, or in an industry where her boss isn't famous and he's just some jerk she works for and she needs that job. Those women need justice too. And so one of the things that we can work on is the infrastructure around the economy that harms particularly women and leaves us without recourse. Examples. For a lot of employment contracts that you sign today, it's going to have a mandatory arbitration clause in it, and it's going to have a mandatory non-disclosure agreement you're going to actually sign if you have a settlement outside of work for harassment. We need to change the law. So one of the things about this next election, this 18 election, we need to change the players list, because we need enough votes to be able to change the law to say you don't have to sign these mandatory arbitration and non-disclosure agreements. We need to have a national paid leave plan. We need people who actually realize that so many families can't reach their full economic potential in the workplace because they have no vacation days, no sick days. So when a family emergency happens, they have no ability to meet that need, whether it's a dying parent or a sick spouse or a sick child or a new baby. Both men and women need to have that ability to take some time off. And so having a national paid leave plan would solve that problem for all workers, part-time, full-time, big companies, small companies, gig economy, doesn't matter. It would solve it. So changing the players list is the most important thing we could all work on, because all these infrastructure issues that give voice to women in the workplace, letting them reach their full potential, whether it's sexual harassment or sexual predator at the workplace, or whether they can't even just get equal pay for equal work. So these are the kinds of economic things that if we fight to change who represents us, we can actually get past and make people's lives better.
Yeah, and I'd like to also mention your record when it comes to women's issues. And, you know, this doesn't necessarily only apply to women, but, you know, you were pretty aggressive in fighting to make changes in the military after a number of stories came out back in 2012 about our female soldiers being sexually assaulted and raped in the military. Republicans fought you tooth and nail when it came to changing the way that you know, members of the military could report and get justice in those cases. And, you know, you definitely walked the walk when it came to women's issues. So interestingly,
it wasn't just Republicans. It was a bipartisan bill, and I had Rand Paul and Ted Cruz on my bill, which is shocking, but true. And so some of these issues can be very bipartisan, and it's not necessarily a right or left issue. It's not a Democrat or Republican. It's just a good issue and a good solution. So we can be bipartisan on a lot of these large structural reforms, but I don't know if you want to mention it in this setting, but the reason why so many people should be against Brett Kavanaugh for the Supreme Court is he will destroy women's reproductive freedom, and you must know this about his record. He has a lot of things wrong with him, but one of the things he really doesn't believe is that you should have a constitutional right to decide about your own reproductive health care. Not only to decide with employers who want to deny you access to birth control, but he sided with the dissent in Roe v. Wade. And so, you know, he praised Rehnquist's decision there. So he doesn't believe that you should have the basic human right to make decisions about when you're having children and how many children you're having, and I think that is horrible. Beyond that, he continues to give voice to corporate America at the expense of regular people. So on the health care thing, he doesn't believe that Obamacare is appropriate because he doesn't believe should take away the insurance companies' right of free speech to charge you more money because they feel like it. And this extends across the board on siding with corporate interests over individual interests. And if you want to get money out of politics, you have to be able to put justices in place that don't believe money is speech, number one, and number two, don't believe that corporations have the same free speech rights as you and I. So that is why we should all, in all 50 states, fight against Kavanaugh.
And what are actionable things that everybody in this state can do? Because they're going to say, you're their senator, calling you to prevent Brett Kavanaugh is futile.
So social media is worldwide. So I would tweet at senators who are not in favor of voting no against him. I would use your platforms, whatever they are, whether they're in the music industry or in media or in TV or in publishing or anywhere, to be able to be heard, just to elevate your voice on whatever stage you possibly can. And you can do that, and you can make sure it reaches all states, because when you are speaking out, you know, whether it's traditional or new media, you can reach anybody anywhere, and you can do it through all platforms.
So we're running out of time, unfortunately, but I wanted to end this panel on a positive note. So I'd like to ask each of you, what is one thing that's giving you hope in this very tumultuous time? Chelsea.
That the majority of us hate this shit. You're not alone. None of us are alone. We're being ruled by a minority party right now. They are not in the majority. So for every person who feels like you're alone, just look outside, because there are millions of us that all feel the same way, and the power in numbers is indisputable.
So what's inspiring me is the number of women, young women, women of color who are running for Congress all across this country. So check out the campaigns of people like Lauren Underwood, look at Lucy McBath, look at Kirsten Sinema. These women are on fire. They're doing incredible stuff. They're making a difference, and they're going to win. And when they win, we are going to flip the House and the Senate. So help them.
Thank you so much. And I just wanted to also chime in on this. You know, being in this room, it's a packed house, and seeing all these young people involved in a political discussion is what gives me hope. I think that for far too long, my generation, the millennial generation, has been brushed aside as entitled people who don't know what's going on. But the reality is we are paying attention, we are very involved, we are very aware, and we're very knowledgeable about what's happening in the political arena. So I want to thank all of you for being part of that discussion and being motivated to push for change in the country. I do think that we can take America back in the best possible way. And again, I want to thank all of you.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. A couple of quick announcements. The session...
How many metaphors can I mix in this particular one?
By the way, do you think this is an 1864 moment right now in the U.S.? Is it, people have called it an existential moment. Is this an 1864 moment? Does it have that kind of historical magnitude, broadly speaking?
I don't. I'm not as gloom and doomy about what's going on in Washington as others are. I think it's a disaster, and it's lunacy, and the man's incompetent, but I have more faith in the underlying institution. I think we'll get rid of him, and the pendulum will swing, and they'll remove his name from history books. They'll be like, your kid, 25 years from now will be reading their textbook in American history, and they'll come to Obama, and then it'll just skip 4 years. Like, your kid will say, well, I don't know, Daddy, what happened between 2016 and 2020? And we'll just like we'll also be in it. We're like, I don't know. I can't remember. There's a weird, it'll just start up again, with whoever, with like Kamala Harris. Like, they'll be like, and then in 2020.
That's what I was talking about. All right, let's take a couple quick questions. And I know we're running short on time, but a couple quick questions.
Hi. When I listen to you talk about disagreeableness, how do you incorporate the ability to take feedback from others while maintaining a certain amount of disagreeableness in your ideas? Yeah.
Well, that's the trick, of course, is I don't think you shouldn't take feedback from others, but I think you should know... You should be strategic and thoughtful about how you respond to feedback. So the point of feedback is not to direct and alter your course. The point of feedback is to educate you about your course. So sometimes the most useful feedback is the feedback that you don't take, right? It's merely